News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow.
Karen, we begin with big news in the chip industry. Nvidia says it plans to resume sales of its H20 AI chip in China. That has shares of the world's most valuable company up more than 5% to a record this morning. We get more from Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie.
You just need to put this in the context of the last few years of continually tightening restrictions when it comes to export controls, both under the Biden administration and under the Trump administration. And the tightening of those export restrictions has not seen any let up at all between both administrations until now. And now you have a U-turn on an export restriction that was implemented in April, cutting off the supply of these H20 AI accelerators. We haven't heard this directly from the US government, but Nvidia put out a blog post saying they will, in short order, be able to resupply these H20 chips into the Chinese market, where, by the way, the CEO, Jensen Huang, currently is for a supply chain conference.
And Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie says the move could add billions to Nvidia's revenue this year, restoring its ability to fulfill orders that had been written off as lost due to government restrictions.
Nathan, there are new developments this morning in the global trade war. The European Union has finalized a list of countermeasures to target U.S. goods worth $84 billion. Let me go to London and get the latest with Bloomberg's Ewan Potts. Ewan, good morning.
Karen and Nathan, American cars, bourbon whiskey and Boeing aircraft. They're all on the EU's finalised list of countermeasures should it decide to retaliate against Donald Trump's tariff policy. In total, Brussels would target $84 billion worth of US goods. This after the EU's trade chief said that Trump's tariffs set to kick in on August 1st would be effectively prohibitive to transatlantic trade. Talks between the two sides are continuing. In London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, Ewan, thank you. Turning back to markets, bank earnings are about to take center stage. JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup all report before the opening bell. And we get a preview from Bloomberg Global financial correspondent Sonali Basak.
JP Morgan is kicking off big bank earnings, and the valuation has risen materially through the course of the year because investors expect more and more M&A deals to come through to fuel investment banking gains and net interest income to hold up strong with interest rates relatively high. Now, the question is, who's winning in the Wall Street game? Is JP Morgan going to bring in more trading revenue than its two big investment banking rivals, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, which report the following day? We'll also be hearing from Citigroup and Wells Fargo, and the question will be around how much more net interest income can be squeezed out of the U.S. consumer. In New York, I'm Sonali Basak, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Sonali, thank you. And ahead of those bank results, we did hear from BlackRock this morning. The world's biggest asset manager says it pulled in $46 billion to its investment funds. Assets hit a record of $12.5 trillion as clients rode out the volatility of President Trump's second quarter tariff policies. Speculation is growing on who will eventually replace Jay Powell. The Washington Post is reporting the White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett as emerging as a leading contender to become the next Fed chair. Hassett was a key advisor during President Trump's first term. The Post says the president thinks Hassett will be more responsive to lowering interest rates. Jay Powell's term as chair doesn't end until May. President Trump is threatening new tariffs on Russia over its war in Ukraine. The president aired his frustrations in an Oval Office meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
We are very unhappy, I am, with Russia. But we'll discuss that maybe a different day. But we're very, very unhappy with them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%.
President Trump said the duties would come in the form of secondary tariffs, a term he's used before for import taxes on countries that do business with America's adversaries. President Trump also says the U.S. is sending top-of-the-line weapons to Ukraine paid for by NATO member states. Secretary General Rutte said all of it should send a message to Russia.
I would reconsider whether I should not take negotiations about Ukraine more seriously than I was doing at the moment, if I was Vladimir Putin. But when I'm Ukraine, I think this is really great news for that.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says Germany, the Nordic nations, and Canada will play a major role in fulfilling Ukraine's military needs. Meantime, the Financial Times is reporting that President Trump asked Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky if he could strike Moscow with long-range weapons. Zelensky reportedly told the president in their 4th of July call that he could if the U.S. supplied the arms.
And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.